And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, great leaders and great scholars. Thank you very much once again for joining us tonight to discuss leadership in this Women's Month. We are starting a Women's Month. It's our first session tonight. Can you believe it is August already, or we are in August already? Only 4 months left before the end of the year. 4 months left before the end of the year. Yeah, that's talking a lot. That says a lot. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We are here to discuss leadership. We are leaders in leadership. This platform is attended by academics from different institutions. We've got politicians, members of the media. We've got executives from public sector, from private sector. Yeah, wow. Yeah, we've got community leaders, religious leaders. We've got managers, professionals from all walks of life who always come and attend this platform every Wednesdays at 6 p.m. We are here to encourage each other as leaders, to inspire each other, to correct each other, to admonish each other, to empower each other, and develop each other. It's where, as I always say in this platform, is where peers empower the peers, or peers talk to other peers. Because as I've said, the attendants, so the participants who come here are executives and professionals and academics. But indeed, people who are humble enough to say, we come, like to listen and learn from others as well. Because as we always say, we meet here to learn, to unlearn, to relearn, and to co-learn together. Because leadership is exactly about that, constantly developing yourself, constantly learning until you go to the grave. If you are a lazy leader, stay away from leadership. Just go and do something else, because leadership is not for lazy people. So that's why we are here every Wednesdays. Welcome to our members and to our regulars, men and women. I admire and respect a lot. We learn a lot every Wednesdays whenever we are together. A special welcome to those colleagues who are joining us for the first time. If you are here for the first time, thank you so much for joining us. And please do remember that we meet every Wednesdays. You may want to come back again next Wednesday, and again and again and again. You may want to maybe block Wednesday 6 p.m. just for these leadership sessions, as others are doing already. So thank you so much for joining us. I want to assure you, we're learning a lot from each other. We are learning a lot from each other. We call this super master pamper classes. You know, really, we learn a lot from each other. So tonight, we are discussing leadership development for women is a leadership issue. Or it's like leadership development for women is also a leadership issue, not only just women issue. So, so Dr. Mavis will be taking us through there to say leadership development. It's not just the development, but it's also a leadership issue, not just a women's issue. And I'm so glad and grateful to welcome my sister, Dr. Mavis Mazhura, who's joining us tonight and will be addressing us. For those who are attending for the first time or joining us for the first time, we allow the speaker to address us, and then after that, we'll engage with the speaker or we engage with each other. Just a brief bio about my sister, Mavis Mazhura. Dr. Mavis is an award-winning leadership psychologist, adult development specialist, executive coach, author, and international speaker with extensive experience helping individuals, teams, and organizations unlock sustainable performance through leadership development, behavior or behavioral change, and emotional transformation. Holding a doctorate in leadership psychology, Dr. Mazhura specializes in the intersection of leadership, human behavior, emotional intelligence, adult development, and performance psychology. Her work focuses on helping professionals move beyond reactive patterns and expand their psychological capacity to lead, influence, and perform at higher levels. Over the past 17 years, she has coached, facilitated, and delivered keynote presentations across Africa, Europe, North America, Asia, and Australia. Her work has impacted leaders, executives, entrepreneurs, and professionals in countries including South Africa, Rwanda, Kenya, Ghana, Nigeria, Uganda, Ethiopia, Senegal, Botswana, Zimbabwe, Namibia, the United States, Canada, India, Vietnam, Turkey, Australia, and the United Kingdom. Dr. Mazhura is recognized for her ability to translate complex psychological concepts into practical leadership and behavioral strategies that drive measurable results. Her intervention integrates evidence-based principles from psychology, neuroscience, neuroscience, emotional intelligence, coaching, and adult learning to create meaningful and sustainable change. As a licensed leadership management international executive coach, she leverages a proven coaching methodology that combines goal-directed action, mindset transformation, behavioral measurement, spaced learning, accountability, and performance tracking to help leaders achieve exceptional outcomes. That is Dr. Mavis Mazhura, ladies and gentlemen. Let us welcome her. And thank you so much, my sister. We really appreciate you. I know you are very busy, but thank you so much just making time to come and mingle with leaders and also to share your insights. And we really appreciate you, welcome you. And we are so eager to not just listen from you, but also to learn a lot from you. Over to you, sis. We are all yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you so much for that introduction, but also thank you for inviting me to this platform. I'm not only here to learn, to share, but I'm also here to learn from all the leaders in the room. So thank you so much. But to get us started with our conversation today, and as you've mentioned, it's Women's Month, and I have been working with leaders, from the various countries. But in the past couple of years, my focus has been really women, leadership development for women. And what I've just been noticing as I develop women or I have conversations with women is the idea that, leadership development for women is a women's issue. And then when you actually start taking women through the process, you start to realize that some of the issues that they are battling with or that they're having to overcome as challenges are not personal issues. They are not women's issues. They are structural. And so those are some of the conversations we'll probably have today. I've been in other conversations where, in some of the universities that I've worked with in South Africa, where you go and you are having conversations around transformation, and you begin to see the data and the information indicating that women are stuck at a particular level, mid-senior level, and to get to the next level, it becomes a challenge. And so you've got the numbers, you've got the statistics, but you find that the people that are discussing the statistics, which is very interesting, are not people who are policy changers or policy makers, but they are people who are implementers of policy. So you begin to ask yourself, so if we're talking about transformation, but we're speaking among the people who can't actually shift the needle, what is the point? What is the purpose? So I think those are some of the kind of thoughts that I've been having lately. And so with that, I have just been kind of talking a lot in platforms where I've been allowed to have, a conversation or speak, is that realizing that leadership development for women is not a women's issue. It's August, the Women's Month. We're going to see lots of events for women. And most of those events are attended by women only, right? It's a good thing to find a place for us as women to network and connect. But after that, then what? Yeah. After going to all those events, the rest of August, then what is the question, right? So I think this is a conversation that needs to be taken beyond just the events that we attend in the Women's Month, back into the organization to really talk about, pertinent issues that can actually move the needle. Yes, we've made so much progress, if you look at it, from where we started in terms of developing women, but we still also have a long way to go. But so to get us started, I'm going to get us into a mentee conversation. So please get your smartphone ready so we can just have your voice into this conversation, or have your voice shape the conversation or the information I will be sharing. So I'm just sharing a mentee. Okay, just confirm for me that you can see my screen.
Yes, we can see the screen, Doc. Yes.
Okay, all right. Is this the one that I want to share? Sorry, please give me a moment. I don't think this is the one. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing and open the one that I've prepared for us. Just give me a moment, please. Okay. Okay, so we've got the mentee on the screen, and I'm just gonna make it bigger. So our first question on there, so go to mentee.com. So if you can go to mentee.com, or you can just use the QR code on the screen, mentee.com, and then you've got your code there, 21985688. So if you actually type it in, or you can just use the QR code. And our first question there is, one word, what comes to mind when you hear women's leadership development or women's leadership program? What comes to mind? Okay, when you hear women's leadership program, what comes to mind with one word? When you hear this, what comes to mind for you? Okay. Women empowerment, inclusion, empowerment. What comes to mind when you hear women's leadership? Okay, special focus. What comes to mind when you hear women's leadership program? What comes to mind for you? Empowerment, transformation. Okay. What comes to mind when you hear women's leadership program? Okay. What comes to mind when you hear women's leadership program? I'm going to move compliance. Okay. That's interesting. Okay. What comes to mind when you hear women's leadership program? Okay. Empowerment, exclusivity. Okay. Women designed leadership, strategic planning, transformers. Okay, thank you. We're going to go to the next question. Whose responsibility is it to develop women leaders in your organization? Whose responsibility is it to develop women leaders in your organization? Okay. Whose responsibility is it to develop women leaders in your organization? whose responsibility is it to develop women leaders in your organization? Okay, thank you. How confident are you that your senior team could name 3 real structural barriers to women's advancement? How confident are you that your senior team could name 3 real structural barriers to women's advancement? How confident are you that the senior team or senior leaders in your organization can name 3 structural barriers to women's advancement? Extremely confident, very confident, slightly confident. How confident are you? Slightly confident. Okay. How confident are you? Okay. Moderately confident. How confident are you that the senior team in your organization could name the 3 real structural barriers to women's advancement? Okay. Let's move on. Describe a moment, without getting too much detail, you saw talent overlooked because of gender. No names needed. Describe a moment you saw talent overlooked because of gender. Have you ever noticed, have you ever experienced, have you ever observed talent being overlooked because of gender? Can you think of a moment where talent was overlooked because of gender? Never, yes. Okay. What has been your experience? Have you ever experienced times where talent, I don't remember, okay. Or maybe I'm not looking, I'm not paying attention to those details. So it might be happening under my nose, but because I'm not paying attention, it was a very heartbreaking situation. Okay. Describe a moment you saw talent overlooked because of gender. Okay. All right, we're going to move on. Rank these from the most least likely to be driving leadership gap in your organization. So in your organization, which of these could be driving leadership gaps in your organization? If any. If any. Which of these are most least likely? Rank this from most to least likely. Okay, rank this from most least to likely. Okay, so bias and promotion criteria, culture and belonging. Which of these? Lack of sponsorship, culture and belonging. Okay. Confidence gap. Okay, lack of sponsorship, bias and promotion criteria, lack of sponsorship, culture of belonging. All right, for the sake of time. In the last 12 months, has your organization changed a structural process, not just run a workshop for women to close these gaps? So the gaps you highlighted, has your organization created any or changed a structural process, not just run a workshop around the issue? Okay. So I've got yes, got no. So in the last 12 months, has your organization changed a structural process, not just run a workshop to close this gap? Yeah, so we go to these DEI workshops and we talk about DEI. And then what after that? Yeah, after learning about diversity, equity, and inclusion, then what? Okay, not sure. Okay, we could dominantly no. Okay. What would change if this were treated as a leadership issue, not a women's issue? What would change if this was a leadership issue and not a women's issue? What would change? What would change? if you as a leader knew this is a leadership responsibility you carry, what would change? What would change? Okay. The silence, 0 out of 15. Inclusion would be vivid. The matter would receive more attention. Natural normal distribution or women in leadership improved performance. Impact would be greater. Everyone would take responsibility and accountability. More resources poured into it. More women empowered, valued, and supported. Okay. What would change? What would change? Okay, for the sake of time, institutional growth and career amendments, greater impact. Love that. Thank you, guys. Let's get into our content. Thank you. And we will refer to this feedback that we've received now or the conversation that we've just had now. Okay. So our conversation really is on leadership development for women. Is it a leadership issue or is it a women's issue? Is it a leadership issue or is it a women's issue? And I think from the Menti, what we can see, what the room has just told us, is that, there's scattered ownership around this idea of developing women or leadership development for women. So others would think it's HR, others would think it's the executive team, others would think it's the line managers, others would think it's the women themselves. So that already tells us that, if no single group claims responsibility for the outcome, which means functionally no one owns it, right? If no single group, if we all in this room could say it's the executive committee, then we would know where ownership sits or lies. But the fact that in our responses, we've already seen that it's scattered. So when ownership is scattered, it means responsibility can also scatter, if that makes sense, okay? I think also from the responses, what we have seen is that confidence is low, not absent. So leaders sense the barriers exist. Few can name them with precision. That's a fluence gap, not a will gap. Okay, so we're having conversations around diversity, equity, and inclusion. But are we actually focusing on what are the structural barriers women do experience as they take up leadership positions? Okay, and we also know that structure really moves. Most rooms report workshops and events. Few report changed process, policy, or promotion criterion. So what we notice is we're trying to transform, is we're trying to bring gender equity into organizations. These are some of the challenges that in leadership positions, ownership scattered, confidence low, not absent, and structure really moves. So we focus on the things that don't quite move the needle. So when you look at it, really, it's not a pipeline issue that we can say we've got women that are stuck in mid-senior level and we're having not enough women advancing to the senior level. It's not a pipeline problem. It's also not a confidence problem because then we take women through a lot of confidence building programs. Not that it's irrelevant, but that alone is probably not sufficient to build or to close the gap. So when you really look at all these challenges, you can really look at them and say, this is a leadership design problem, right? It's a leadership design problem. Development, promotion, sponsorship, successions are all systems that leadership designs. And they resource these designs and they also govern these processes. So if women are underrepresented at senior levels, the system, not the women in it, is the first place to look. Right? So it's not the women, it's the system. Why are women in our organization struggling to get to the next level or to get to the senior level in our organization? So we now see that if we persist with the old frame, right? If we persist with the old frame that, it is a women's issue. So we then find people focusing on, what is easier to fix? The person is easier to fix, not the system, isn't it? So let's give them more coaching for confidence, right? To commission and easier to evaluate the redesign. It is easier to commission and easier to evaluate than redesigning promotion criteria or resourcing models. So let's send them for more coaching. Let's send them for another leadership development program. We're not saying that is not essential, but that alone does not change or it takes a longer time to actually change the system or the trajectory of women in organizations. Okay, so programs look like action without requiring power. So if we keep on sending more women to these workshops run by HR without executive sign-off, what happens? Okay, so the executives don't actually take the responsibility, right? So it becomes just an HR issue where HR is really just developing the women and also just making sure that it's developing or creating the succession pools that requires people who currently hold the power to give some of it up, right? So you are developing women, the people who are holding the power continue to hold the power. They are not giving some of that power up. So the women who has been developed gets back into a system where power is just being held by a few people or current group of people who are not willing to let go of that power. And so the women continue to struggle in the mid-senior level. Okay. If ownership is sitting with HR and DAI and not P&L leaders, or profit and loss, we're not seeing it as a leadership concern. So it sits with HR, right? So if it's sitting with HR, when the accountability owner is a support function rather than a business leader, the initiative competes for attention instead of being embedded in how the business is run. Okay, so it's a support function. It is something that we do when we can do it. It's not a business imperative. We don't see it as a strategic objective. So what happens? It sits there and it will get attention when other things that would seem and deem as important get the attention. Okay, and what is the cost of this particular wrong frame? What is the cost? What we're seeing, right, because of maintaining or seeing the fragmentation on ownership and not treating this leadership development for women as a P&L issue, what we then see is you have 45% of senior women that are considering leaving their organizations. Okay, so there's a high rate of turnover, women leaving organizations. And to replace a senior leader, you're looking at 500,000 in just to replace one senior leader if they leave minimum. You're looking at that. So the cost of actually replacing a senior leader, a senior woman leader when they leave to an organization, which is not something that we actually put on the profit and loss to say, by us not supporting or structurally changing our organization, this is what is costing us financially. So it's an invisible leadership leak. We can't see it because we are not computing it. We are just really just looking at the fact that, okay, fine, women are leaving. And maybe we are just not looking at what is the cost of women leaving our organization. We're also seeing 85 to 90% reinvestment in training with no matching change to the structure or process. So we keep on pumping money into training. But if you haven't changed the system, it means those people that have been trained can't come and actually fit into the system that it hasn't changed. Okay, and what we also see is persistence. So average time a structural bottleneck persists once first identified. So there is no change. The bottleneck continues. The structural bottleneck persists, and it continues to be, a challenge or a structural issue that women have to deal with it. So attrition concentrate at the exec level. The organization cannot afford to lose the senior bench. We already said more women stuck in the mid-senior. We need more women in the senior executives, in the executive or senior level. But what happens is that's exactly where we are losing women. And so it becomes the fact that, you are, the level in which you need more women is the level that you're losing them. Okay, and what happens? We spend more time in training, 18 to 24 months, because the structural cause was never addressed. And what happens? Trust erodes. Talented women read repeated programs with no structural follow-through as a signal, not as support, not support. Okay, so women begin to just not trust the systems in which where they need to be operating. So they keep on looking for better organizations that are more supportive if we are not changing the structural or the systemic issues that impact women and their leadership. So when you look at the systemic lens, when we are talking about leadership development or leadership capacity, for women, one of the things that we notice is that we're seeing a mushrooming of technical associations for women. You're going to see women in tech. You're going to see women in mining. You're going to see, women in energy. There's nothing wrong with these technical organizations to support women. But what we're seeing is there's concentration on giving them technical skills. And so they get the technical skills and they get promoted based on the technical skills. And they still struggle to get to the senior level. Why? Because the training that is only giving them the technical skills without transforming their leadership identity just kind of gets them to a particular level and they get stuck there. Okay, so when we're talking about developing women, we need to realize that we need to develop them as a total person. And the reason we need to develop them as a total person, we can't only target on skill alone. We need to develop the system, the human system that they operate in. So when we're developing women, we need to make sure that we're developing them in the key dimensions of life, right? So focus on, example, the physical. We're talking about women burning out. How do we train women to develop and sustain their energy? Okay, how do we train women? And some of the things that happens here is you have a woman that is in an executive role, they come home, their home chores or their expectation at home do not kind of go on hold just because you become an executive. So you've got women that are operating at that level. I remember speaking to one executive at the UN and she says, you know what, I do appreciate the fact that my husband is actually clapping hands for me to get an executive role. But the same guy expects me to get home and give him food and cook food for him. Okay, that's culture. So there's an intersection of, okay, you're leading, but there's a cultural expectation. There's cultural conditioning that a woman has to deal with. Okay, but also even the people around that woman still have to deal with. So how do we train a woman to be able to have the boundaries, to be able to have hard conversations, because some of those conversations are not being had because being trained and wired and conditioned to say, for you to be a good woman, this is how you need to show up. And so you constantly, I experience what we call raw identity conflict, right? So you are trained to be this particular woman, even at work, it becomes difficult to give hard feedback. Because remember, all your life you've been trained for you to be an acceptable, for you to be a good woman. This is how you need to show up. You need to be likable. You need to be nice. And so now sometimes having a hard conversation might appear as if you're not being nice as a woman. So you've got this system, the social conditioning that has trained you, that now interferes with your ability to lead or your capacity to lead, right? And so again, we go back to the total person, the intellectual. We've given them the technical skill set. But we've been trained as women to focus on other people's needs, mostly. So you get into the organization, you find I was coaching a particular professor who is attending a university in an interview in one of the university for a position on research. And so when she was sharing her experience, she knows the work, but she focused on explaining the operational matter of the work and could not actually focus on what is the impact of my work? What is the strategic impact of my role? Because as women, we are told to do things. We are trained to do things. So when it comes to actually being able to judge the impact of our work, we struggle unless we are taught, right? So you will know you would have done the work, and this is probably explaining the issue of why stuck in mid-senior level. That's the operational level. That's where we get to do the work. And I normally call it the donkey work. So that's where the donkey work occurs, right? I normally laugh with my women leaders to say, who promotes a donkey? Like the donkey is the hard worker. It gets the work done. You're not going to promote it because if you do, who's going to do the work, right? If you do. So we need then to look at what are some of the social conditioning challenges women face? How do they interfere with their ability to lead? So even as we talk about developing women, we cannot focus on development that's just giving them technical skills. because they already come with a disadvantage that is coming from the social system, right? Again, let's look at the social and emotional, right? Relationships. We know that most deals, most promotions, and most decisions are made maybe in the golf course. How many women are going to the golf course? Yes, we are trying to get there, but I think it's not how we are wired. You've got responsibilities, right? You need to make sure the homework is done, the house is clean, whatever the case might be. So you don't have the luxury of actually just going to play golf, so that you could negotiate, you could meet with people that could, sort of sponsor you next time, that could speak about you in a room. You could make the deals as our male counterparts would do. So it becomes a challenge. It becomes, it interferes with our leadership. It does interfere with our leadership, because now you need to formulate these relationships. And one interesting one, each time you're speaking or coaching women leaders, you often hear the fact that they say, I don't like politics. Let's just do our work and get home. I don't like politics, right? But politics is the way the organizations are run. But we are not trained politics. We just want to get the work and get on with it, right? So what happens? You're not building the relationships. You're not politicking like others. That interferes with the opportunities that you may get to the next role, if that makes sense, okay? And then spiritual and purpose, right? Meaning and values, identity as a leader. So our identity, again, as women, is shaped early on in life, focusing on every other person's needs, right? Making sure you're taking care of everyone. You get into the organizational space, this pattern can actually repeat itself. I remember, again, coaching a particular woman leader. She said she does her team's work. She manages a team of 9 managers. I don't know how many people are below those managers, but she's an executive person in in the organizations. She says she spends the 8 hours doing her manager's job, and then she starts her job at 6 p.m. and she sleeps around 1 a.m. And I'm like, flip. Right? Why? Why are you doing their work? Because again, she feels it's high stakes. If it doesn't reach the expected end correctly, she feels that it's a reflection of her as a manager or as a leader. So it's a reputational damage, right? Again, it's the thoughts, right, that she has. It's the system that is created that for women to be deemed competent, right, we start to feel that even if a team is not performing, it's a reflection of me as a leader. It's a reflection of me as a leader. But also when you're managing a team and they see that you're female, the way they would show up sometimes, in some cases, is not the same way that they would show up if they were being managed by a male leader. So this, again, begins to interfere with our leadership. Let me pause for a bit. And just hear your thoughts. Is any of what I've said or any of what I'm saying resonating with you? Is it something that you've experienced, maybe using the chat box? Yeah, frustration. Okay. I don't know if this is a response to, okay. Is any of what I've shared something you've witnessed, something you've resonated, or something that's now making you question or think about how you show up as a leader, home and away? Or things you haven't thought about? Donkey work. Okay. Who promotes a donkey? Nobody, right? Let the donkey do the hard work. So we are all happy, right? Okay. What are some of the thoughts you're having regarding what I've shared so far? Let's just hear your thoughts. Okay. Mind blown. Okay. The resistance to politics is real. Yeah. I mean, let's just get the work done. We're not wired. We're not trained for that. We're not conditioned for that. But it's a reality. It's happening. It's there. And we need to engage. We need to be able to, kind of engage at that level. Okay. Any other thoughts? Let me hear from the gents in the room. Let's hear from the gents in the room. This is a systemic problem, not just an organizational work problem. That's it, right? So social conditioning is a system. Organizational conditioning is a system. So we almost like repeat the social conditioning and just translate and bring it into the organization, and we perpetuate it, right? And we just perpetuate it. Okay. All right, let me carry on. Okay, and so why this must be transformative. So when we're developing women leaders, Why must we look at a process, not an event? Yeah, we can't take them into a room and say, we're giving you leadership skills, right? And then hope that you can do well afterwards. We need a process, not an event, when we're developing women leaders. Why? Because they are navigating these two challenges. Past conditioning. So we have internalized how we've been schooled around what a good woman needs to be, how she needs to act. So we carry this into the room. We carry this into the leadership room. We carry this into the boardroom. So early socialization to defer, to please, and self-efficacy as the price of belonging, we bring it into the room. So we sacrifice ourselves as a price of belonging. Guilty or hesitation around visible ambition and self-promotion. So yeah, you begin to get labels if you're an ambitious person. Yeah, you begin to get labels if you're an ambitious woman, right? Okay, you might even end up on your own, right? Because it's like, yay, who are you? Who are you? Okay, over-indexing on competence before claiming readiness for authority. So women are always having to over-prepare and over-qualify, get more qualifications and more certificates before they even say, I'm ready for the situation. Okay? Then internalize imposter syndrome. So we hear about imposter syndrome as if it's a personal flaw, and yet it's the system that is created. The way it's created makes you doubt yourself, right? The way it's created, it makes you doubt yourself. If you see other women leaders, senior leaders leaving regularly, it just makes you feel like, am I ready? Was I ready? Can I be ready? Okay. And then they're also facing structural barriers, promotion criteria and leadership presence norms calibrated to one style. Yes, we've made progress. Maybe in the last 100 years, we started working as women. We've seen more women in the workplace. But has the sort of organizational requirement for what leadership ought to look like changed? Has it changed? Has it considered, the feminine style of leadership? Or we still required to be more masculine in our leadership, right? Sponsorship and stretch assignments allocated through informal homogeneous networks. We spoke about the fact that people will complete this thing at the golf. And then when you come back, it's a decision made, okay? Career interruptions are penalized in ways tenure-based systems don't absorb, okay? So we have, if you left, I remember I was doing a DEI session again at one of the universities, and what came through was, if you left for maternity leave, when you come back, if you were in the process of trying to write or trying to publish for you to become, full-time lecturer or professor, it just kind of fizzles. So you have to almost like start afresh, or, it poses. Nobody considered that you had this social responsibility, not even just a personal, but it's a social responsibility, right? And I think this is interesting because we had, a situation where in the Netherlands, women started saying, we are not having children. We are not having children. And as a result, we're going to focus on our career. We are not having children. Now we sit with a situation where you've got an aging population and there's no younger people, because at some point women said, we are not having children because you penalize us for a social responsibility, right? Okay. And then feedback and evaluation systems that read confidence as competence, right? And this is very interesting. Remember, confidence is something that's trained. We train our boy child confidence. We train our girl child loyalty. And when they show up at work, we say, we want confidence from you. But I've been told to be loyal, to be nice, to be people-pleasing. Now, where is the confidence going to come from? Okay, and it's systemic. It's not a personal flaw. It's systemic. So transactional training changes what the leaders know. So if we send our leaders or women leaders to a 2-day, 3-day, or even if you send them to a 7-day, 3 months, 6 months program that is just dishing out information, which is not changing the identity, guess what happens? They will have the knowledge and the information, but it would not have changed the emotions. It wouldn't have changed the narratives. It also would not have changed the self-concept. Neither has it changed the habits. So a transformative development changes how a leader makes meaning of her own authority, worth, and voice, while the organization removes the structural barriers alongside her. Neither works alone. Neither works alone. Okay? So systemic barriers, none of these are solved by developing the individual person alone. So structural issues. So if your promotion criteria hasn't changed, it doesn't matter if you help the women to go through a transformative process. Okay. If your succession pools and role design that were never audited for who they implicitly favor. So we need to look at the roles you're advertising, who do they implicitly favor? Because if we don't actually look at that, then we're constantly going to continually attract the same group of people for the roles that we're saying we need to have more women leaders in these senior roles. Cultural norms around visibility, risk-taking, leadership presence, calibrated to one style, read as a universal standard. So we need to relook at the way we say, leadership ought to show up. Yeah. And a lot of us, again, we're talking about you need to be visible. It's something that we have to learn, because ideally a woman doesn't speak, you're in the background. This is what you've been taught all your life. So what do? Even when you've done good work, it's always a stretch to have a conversation with women and tell them to say, you need to advocate for yourself, right? I do run a monthly webinar for women, a free monthly webinar, and we get about 180 women kind of sign up for that webinar monthly, and you get about maybe 50 to 80 showing up. And what often happens is you can see there's a desire to learn. And then when we're like, okay, this is an event, it's a webinar, it's just giving you information, you need to go through a transformative process, but the transformative process is going to be 10 weeks, and obviously that's going to come at a cost. Many women want to go through the transformative process, but they lack the confidence to go and just advocate for themselves, right? Because advocating for themselves can come with penalties. It might mean that when you're saying I need the transformative process, then you're being seen as a person who is struggling. You're being seen as a person who's not competent enough. But yet this is a structural, it is a systemic issue that needs to be addressed in terms of me being able to be visible, because that's not how I'm trained. That's not how I'm conditioned, if that makes sense, okay? And developmental, stretch assignments and P&L exposure allocated informally through existing, often homogeneous networks. So this is structural. And sponsorship, mentorship is often widely. Active sponsorship spending, political capital to advocate in the room is offered narrowly. Okay, so these are the structural issues that women are facing, that even if we send them for a 2-day training, it does not help them to get up faster and quicker as we need them to, okay? And then what ownership looks like by level. So if we're talking about ownership that is a leadership ownership, not just a support function ownership, what does it really look like? Okay, so we can co-create, we can have concrete decisions at every level. So executive committee, set and track senior gender representation as a business KPI. And we know that people will have these transformation data or DEI data. But if it's just being repeated to people who cannot make the decisions, who cannot make the structural change, who cannot change the policy, it's a tick. We saw earlier on someone said compliance. So we're just doing compliance. We're seen to be seen as doing something. And it also requires diverse slates for every senior succession pool. Personally sponsor, not mentor at least one rising women leader. Let me ask the gents in the room. How many of us are mentoring at least one woman? Let me ask the gents in the room. How many of us are mentoring at least one woman? Who is training the young girl? Yes, who's training the young girl, Bungan? Okay, yeah, the fear that your team performance is a reflection of your leadership identity, certainly. When men go golfing, women opt to focus on internal business challenges. Okay, internal business challenges or personal business challenges, I don't know. Okay, all right. Okay, so audit stretch assignments, line managers. How could you support, the development of women? Audit stretch assignments, allocation for pattern, not intent. Who are you allocating for stretch assignments if you're a line manager? Name potential in performance conversation, not just delivery. Okay. Name potential. What is the potential the person has? And how do you close the gap of that potential. Flag when a woman is ready, but the raw design isn't. So we need to look at, is the raw design, suitable? Is the woman ready? So we need to have and kind of look at that. And then HR and OD redesign promotion criteria before running another workshop, track structural change, not attendance as a success metric, measure or make sponsorship a measured leadership behavior, not a value statement. So we always hear that if we can't measure it, right, we can't manage it. If we can't measure it, we can't manage it. We also need to move from program to process. So the shift is to reframe actually, the shift this reframe actually requires in practice, what we need to do in practice, okay? So what we often see, this is what we often see, a women's leadership workshop, this Women's Month, send them to many workshops and conferences, right? They are run annually by HR or DI, measured by attendance and satisfaction, confidence building for the individual, success equals she changes. What we need to reframe, leadership system design. How are we leading, right? Our system. Who is missing in leadership? How do we bring them along? Okay, it needs to be owned by an executive team, measured by structural change made, bias auditing of criteria and process. And success is equal system change. So when we have done a successful job in supporting women, it's not that the women changes, it's that the system changes. So everybody changes, right? Everyone changes. So that's when we can see we have done a good job. So for every leader in this room, regardless of gender, this issue of developing women is not a women's initiative. It's not a Women's Month issue. It is a leadership behavior issue. Okay. So again, think about it. If you're in the room and you're in a position of power, you're in a position of influence, who's the one woman you will actively sponsor? Will you, in the next stretch assignments you have, be able to audit? Yeah, before assigning it informally, who else could you reasonably consider? Okay, in your next team meeting, name this as a leadership issue, not a women's issue. Name the fact that developing women is not a women's issue. That's not a Women's Month issue. And the question is, if you're a male leader in this room, how many women events are you going to attend? And no, you can say, I'm not a woman, I'm not attending. But since we're saying it's not a women's issue, it's a leadership issue, we need to get in touch with the challenges that women are experiencing, the challenges that they're facing in their leadership journeys, so that we can have these courageous conversations, but also that when we bring these issues, it doesn't become like a fault-finding, witch-handing, or a competence attack on a female leader, but we do look at it as a systemic issue rather than a you issue. Okay. We also need to be able to track at least one process, not one person, but also a process. Pick one, promotion, allocation, you can influence and commit to reviewing the criteria, or at least having your voice in the room so that we can be able to have a conversation that really looks at this as a systemic issue. So we don't need women to become different leaders. We need leadership to become a different system. Right? We don't need women to become different leaders. We need the system that is different, that supports all leadership, female and male leadership. But we just know that at the moment, we have a business challenge where there's a leadership leak because of the challenges women are experiencing as a result of just the social conditioning and the structural challenges that they have to face. And so this is important. This is an important conversation for us to continue to nurture and have in organizations. And with that, those are my thoughts around leadership. Leadership development for women is not a women's issue. It is a leadership issue. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Mavis. What an insightful, very, very instructive and thought-provoking presentation. Thank you so much for that presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, we can now engage with the speaker. You can raise your hand and we can then ask the question or even comment or observation. You can do it via the chat room. But if you are comfortable, you can address or speak. And then we encourage that you open your camera if it's possible, as we are recording the what we call this session. Just for those who may not know, probably it's your first time attending this conference. Why I'm talking about conference? You say now, Dr. Mavis, you're speaking about women's conferences and all that. I thought this is a conference. I'm sure it means that we must organize a conference as well. We actually used to do that every year, but unfortunately this year, I don't know whether it will still be possible. Those who may maybe be joining us for the first time, we've written a couple of books emanated from this platform, and then the two of them focusing on women empowerment, or women in leadership. So I do believe that the men who are here in this platform are very, very I don't know, should I use the word converted or transformed? Some of them even written chapters in these books. The first book that we wrote, Women in Leadership, Breaking the Glass Ceiling. And then the foreword was by Professor Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka. And then it's got so many different colleagues who contributed. These books are available at Exclusive Books. So anyone, if you want them, you can go to Exclusive Books. Another one, this one was really published last year. Last year, we did have a conference, a women's conference, and then we published this book in that conference in August. The Power of Women in Leadership. And then the forward was the Auditor General, Tsakane Maluleka. So please do go to Exclusive Books, and then you'll find them, the books. I know a person like my brother there, Bongani Pagati, will really tell you that, hey, this book, because I know he not only bought it in the IPM. Oh, you see, he's got it. He's not only bought it at the IPM conference, but he brought so many people, so many customers and clients to buy it. So please do familiarize yourself, and then you can get them. But really, we are very glad for the presentation. I see the hands there. Lungilema Petre will be the first one. Bongani, I don't know if you were asking a question there in the chat room, but you're saying who's training the young girl. Maybe you can be the second, the one there, but we'll start with my brother, then Lungilema Petre, then Bongani will be the next one. Over to you, my brother. Over to you, sir.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much, Doc, with such a powerful presentation. Very thought-provoking, I must say. I have been involved in mentoring young women now for close to 30 years. And in fact, it's people that I have not mentored that I am struggling to understand what is their challenge. You mentioned the socialization, but the people that I've mentored, some of them would be originally from the rural areas. Others would be from the urban areas, different schools, others having gone to private schools, others in public schools. But I is sitting as a board member in corporate. I've noticed people in leadership, women in leadership, who are, at the level of executive, who do not feel, it's like people feel like they don't belong, to an extent of others even avoiding board meetings. Every time there's a board meeting or a committee meeting where a person is supposed to present as an executive, somehow the person gets sick until everybody starts noticing that there's this avoidance. But when do you pick up that there's a challenge of socialization, and how do we address it? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. So
I
don't
Doctor,
know
if you
that.
don't mind, Dr. Mavis, do you mind if you can take two, maybe you can respond to them? Bongani, okay. Over to you, then Doc will respond after my brother, the Bongani. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, good evening, and good to be back on the platform. It's been a while. I think the important thing, the point I wanted to make, and not necessarily to be controversial about who's training the young girl, I think the issue is that we do have to take a long-term view as in a strategic view. I mean, if we talk about being strategic, we have to be long-term. So no one single intervention is going to solve this problem on its own.
Yeah.
So, when I kind of throw the thought out to people to say, who's training the young girl? We all get trained by mothers, boys and girls alike.
Yeah.
That's your first formative stage.
Yeah.
So one of the things I get involved in the schools, so by the time that child arrives at the school, whether it's grade triple naught or grade naught, it's gone through the hands of a home. And I'm generalizing because obviously we have, children-led households and all sorts of other dynamics and single parents. But the truth of the matter is that's the first point.
Yeah.
But even if we get that right, our belief systems as adults is also going to be addressed and challenged. So you made the example of even when I get home, I have to do X. I remember mentoring a young lady, and she's saying to me, "Hey, but Parag, I need to leave. I need to go and cook for my husband." And I said to her, "So who used to cook for him before you arrived?" He didn't starve. So the point is we have to start challenging our own thinking to say, and sometimes we create beliefs that give us self-validation. Because if I don't cook for him, suddenly I'm not important.
Right.
And I'm not making this easy, but I'm kind of just basically sharing from my experience having walked the journey so far. And I think very often, I can give you millions of examples, but very often part of the key issue is that we look for the short-term improvement.
Yeah.
So what can we do to see 50% women in the workplace? It's a bit like matric results. If we don't fix ECD, for the next 12 years, those matric results are not really going to change. So we have to say as a society, how do we start fixing the building blocks?
Yeah.
And yes, we must understand that we'll do other things here, but this is not going to be substantively fixed for a year or two or however long the strategic plan is. And a lot of it is also as we train young people, we have to train them not to necessarily take other people's views and beliefs as being gospel truth. If you think you can ride that bicycle, ride it. You happen to be a girl, but the two wheels will still go around. That's simple science. It doesn't matter whether a boy or a girl is on the bicycle. So I think we have to start saying, how do we become more systemic, constantly create awareness, constantly create challenging, but how do we truly start taking a longer term view? And how do you start really saying, changing beliefs and perceptions? Because that's the bedrock of what's going to change our society. Whether it's in me cooking or being cooked for at home, or whether it's me leading the organization. And being a woman is not a terminal disease. Women have babies, they come back to work and life goes on. Can we just move on? But let me leave it at that. I think that's so there's nothing wrong with everything you've said tonight. It's really about saying, as organizations, we think strategically for the next 20 years in our business. How do we think about the next 20 years in terms of what we look like, as opposed to filling in an EE form?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Okay. All right, so I will answer the question on when do you pick the socialization or the social conditioning. I don't know if you can actually pick it, because most of the time when women even come on this transformative process themselves, they are not even aware until you start to have a conversation. Because remember, this is something that's subconscious, something in the background. So until you start giving it language, until you start to have the conversation, then people start saying, oh yeah, yes, oh yeah, yes. Because it's something that you are wired to be. So it's almost like an identity. So you don't even think that it is a problem. So those women who don't actually show up in those board meetings, they would have come and see that there's not many women that look like, there's not many people that look like them. So when they come in, the emotional labor, the impression management of constantly being in a room where you don't see other people like you gets heavy. It gets heavy, right? So I think it's that where we are thinking, when you are in a room that's full of people that look like you don't have to think about it. You don't have to think about it because you're covered. But a person who is the only one in the room, if you've ever been the only one in the room, you know what I'm talking about, right? It's like you are actually sensing, you're actually impression management. There's an emotional labor, a heaviness. You're carrying the representation of the people who are not in the room, and that can be emotionally taxing. So I don't know if we can actually pick it, but we just need to know that it is there. So I don't know if I've answered your question really. Okay, and I see questions on the chat. If social conditioning interferes with the ability to lead, how do you address this?
I'll do that for you, Doc. I'll facilitate that for you. So are you done with the two questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So the other one.
No, it's fine. I'll do the questions for you.
Okay.
Any other questions, colleagues, for the doc before we go to the chat room? I see some question in the chat room. Anyone who wants to ask? I do see Malerato would like to ask your question, would like to address us. Maybe you can explain more, expatiate more on your question, because I can see that you've got some very interesting questions there in the chat room. Malerato, are you able to ask your questions, or do you want us to read from? Are you still here? Okay, maybe let's just read her questions then. I think she's got two questions there. If social conditioning interferes with the ability to lead, how do we address this? Where do we actually begin? The reality is that women inherently suffer from an imposter syndrome. I think, okay. And then the next one, it is concerning that specialized programs such as Women in Energy or Women in Rail do not seem to attract desirable attention from current leadership and male counterparts. Is this special focus on developing women a threat in itself, considering the traditional defined roles of women in society? Maybe, Doc, you can just address those questions. But if I may ask, just from this question by Malurato, if you are saying that this specialized program, such as women in leadership, women in energy, women in health, do not seem to attract desirable attention from current leadership, what does that mean? I mean, if are they not? I mean, I know so many different specialist programs, as I said, that women in this, women in that. Even in this platform, there are so many colleagues who are leading certain women in different sectors. Are they not moving any needle? Are they not shifting, or are they not assisting or helping? Any thoughts there, Edo?
Yeah. So they're not, it's not necessarily that they're not moving needle, but I think it's not sustainable. On its own, it will probably not give the sustainable result we're looking for, right? Because we're giving them technical expertise. So we still find that, yes, we've got women in engineering, but when you go into the organizational space, you still find a lot of women engineers coming back, recalling themselves or being recalled from executive and senior level positions, because the technical competence alone cannot sustain how they lead or who they are as they lead. To your point earlier on, I think it was a point of the earlier question that we had that said they will avoid board. They've made it to the board level, but someone is avoiding to go and give a presentation at the board. Then you begin to see that there is an issue of they're avoiding it. It's avoidance. So they've made it that far, and yet they are now battling to sustain that leadership. So it will give them the technical expertise, but sustaining them in that leadership position. And that's why we have a high attrition rate as well in the senior level where we need them the most. So we need to develop not only the technical expertise, but also the identity. We need to help them with transforming their identity alongside the structural changes within the organization. Okay. And so Marilato's question, if social conditioning interferes with the ability to lead, how do we address this? So I think we need to, how do we get conditioned? So conditioning is spaced repetition over a longer period of time, which shapes emotions, narratives, habits, and self-concept. So when we are doing leadership development for women, it needs to be able to leverage these 4 pillars. So whatever we are doing needs to be able to take a longer term process. It needs to be a process of conditioning and rewiring. And you can't recondition and rewire someone by giving them information in 3 days. Okay, so you need transformation, and we need to follow a process of transformation which allows for not just behavior change, but identity change so that we can have sustainable behavior change. Okay. And the following question was really linked to what you said earlier on the women in leadership, the different groups of women that mushrooming, and how they are not necessarily, they are helping, but alone they usually fizzle out. And again, why is it not attracting male and leadership attention? Because we're still viewing it as a women's issue. So that's why we're saying it is a leadership issue. So we need to have this conversation, not as a women's issue, it is a leadership issue. So when we have women in energy, how many leaders in the P&L positions are supporting or funding or resourcing, these groups? So I think that is the, kind of question or thought we need to have around that. Okay.
Thank you. Thanks,
I don't know
Doc.
if it's me or is Prof frozen?
Can you hear me now? Thank you. Thanks, Doc. Thank you very much. Bongani, I saw your hand. Do you want to make a follow-up question there?
Not even just a follow-up question, but maybe a comment, because some of these things, when we look at something and we trying to understand the dynamic for women, we assume the same dynamic does not play out for men. So when you talk about building technical competence, and we've seen this happen with men, and part of the leadership problem today is exactly the fact that we've trained people technically, we then make them managers and leaders, but they actually aren't managers and leaders. Mm. So the same phenomenon will play out with women, not because they are women. It's not a gender problem. It's a developmental problem. And we have to then start sifting out and recognizing when we're making the same systemic error with women and then saying, but women can't become leaders. And if women are not leaders by definition, because they're not emulating what men are doing, it's assuming what men are doing is good. Sometimes we have to challenge that paradigm. So if I'm technically competent, but I'm not comfortable in leading, if I'm the only person in the room, as a male, sometimes my daughter walked into a webinar the one day and said, but you're the only black guy on this call. This is 30 years into democracy or 25 years into democracy at the time. The same discomfort is going to happen. So I think, hence when my earlier comment, you've got to step back and say, what are the systemic things that are going wrong? We are bringing people into environments where we actually firstly don't make them feel welcome, but actually structurally there's a problem. And how do we start to address those? So maybe I don't have women in the exco, but bring the next level down women to join that meeting. And suddenly I have a bit of point of familiarity in the room. And I also now know that I have to be a role model for them. So what I present has actually got to be future fit. So those are the simple things which I think the message I really wanted to make is that let's also not attribute some of the failures just to gender. They're also systemic.
Any thought on that, Dr. Mavis?
Yeah, so he's echoing exactly the same thing to say, yes, there's the social conditioning is systemic. It's cultural, it's family, those are systems, right? And then when you go to the organizational space as well, it's systemic, right? And so it is true. That's why we're saying it's a leadership issue, not a women's issue. So when we see it as a leadership issue, then it's a systemic issue. It cannot be addressed only at a a gender level or at a women's level, or even we start to pit it against each other to say men and women. It's a system issue. So how do we look at it as a system issue and begin to co-create the solutions for it together rather than this one versus that one?
Thank you. Thank you very much. The last question from me, and I'll ask you to respond to this question and also to give us your parting shot. Then I'll ask Professor Zide to thank you. What is your view on this PhD syndrome, pull head down, that the women who are at an upper level, they seem not to be accommodating or uplifting or lifters rise as, what is it called? That they'll kick and push them away, and they'll not accommodate them and give them space. Any thoughts on that? And then you can give us your closing remarks, and then Professor Zede will thank you. Over to you, sir.
So I think it's a scarcity mindset. So when you are the only one there, you become almost like a token to the system. So to think that other people can also come, it becomes some kind of competition, that if this one comes, then what will it mean for me? But if we had abundance, if we had many women in that role, then it ceases to be something that is special. So it's almost like the system puts you in competition with one another because, A, you're the special one who has been chosen. Right. So if you have been chosen and then you allow others into the space, what does it mean for you? So it's the system is created and shapes a scarcity mindset for women. And then to think that if you have been chosen, if you've made it, you are special. So you don't want anyone else to be as special as you are. So I think it's a mindset shift that needs to occur. And again, it's a systemic issue. If you're the only one there, anyone else that's coming looks like competition.
Perfect. Any parting shots, Doc?
So yeah, thank you so much for the conversations, for the input from everyone and the work that you're doing for women. And I think as we continue with Women's Month, I think let's continue to see leadership development for women as a leadership issue. And I think it's more powerful when it's coming from our male counterparts. It is more powerful when you guys say it. So thank you for writing the book on women, but also thank you for continuing to root for us as we have this conversation on structural changes to support, the development, not only the development, but also the positioning of women in society. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Doc. Thank you. I don't know is it Professor Zide there who's coming with that noise? Professor Zide, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, my professor and colleagues. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I think let me first thank you, my professor, for always arranging for these thought-provoking sessions. We have listened to so many of our colleagues dissecting and debunking the leadership topic from different perspectives and from different dimensions. I think that Mavis has done us proud tonight for her presentation, which I found to have been very informative, very authoritative, very provocative, and very transformative. She has indeed touched quite a number of buttons which are soul-searching, particularly to us as men living in a patriarchal environment. She was able indeed to deal even with the elephant in the room. And so for those words, Mavis, we really want to thank you, particularly coming as they do at this Women's Month. I know that the topic is a leadership issue. It's not only just women, but we have to recognize you coming as you do during the month of August, which we all know is a Women's Month. And so thank you ever so much. And I hope that we will see you again on this platform. maybe with this presentation being part of our coming book on women in leadership. Thank you very much, and back to you, my professor.
Thank you very much, my professor. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, can we appreciate our speaker? Can we show her some love? If you can just find an icon there, down there, it's called React. Just press something there. That will show some love as we are giving her a round of applause, and we are thanking her, and we appreciate her for such a lovely and very impactful presentation, as Professor Zita has said. Thank you so much, Dr. Mavis. Thank you for your time. Thank you for really moving us tonight. You've moved us, and definitely we will invite you back in a very near future, because we want to get more of this. It's very, very important. And I thank you so much, my sister. Ladies and gentlemen, the session is closed now until we meet again next week, Wednesday, same place, same time. We use the same login details really for all our, so we don't change them. We just change the speakers and the topics, but the login details are the same. So please do join us again next week. It's a bumper month for women. We've got powerful women and powerful speakers that we'll be having in this month. Thank you so much. May God bless you, and may God bless Africa, Africa, our beautiful continent. Thank you and goodbye. See you next week. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
She is. Wish.